Let's take a little look at what we do when we work with formulas and we're solving equations that have formulas. And sometimes we just want to solve for an unknown, and we don't really need numbers. We just want to solve for a certain variable. So, for example, example number 1 does give us some values for a couple of our variables. This is an area. Formula is what it is. Area is equal to base times height. And what if we knew the area was 45, but we knew the base was 15, but we didn't know the height? We would really say that meant we had 45 is equal to 15h. Now, how do you solve? Well, you just divide by the coefficient of the variable term. We divide both sides by 15, and the 15s would cancel. We would have h, or the height, would equal 45 divided by 15, which is 3. So, in other words, if we just have one unknown, we can always solve for it by just simplifying. We can add and subtract terms, or we can divide, and we can always solve for that one unknown term, just like we've solved equations that have numbers. Now, there's another formula that you need to be familiar with. It's interest, and its interest is equal to principal times rate times time. The interest in this particular problem is something they've given us. It's 3,750. And then they told us the principal was 25,000. And then they didn't tell us what the rate was. They told us the time was 6 years, and time is always represented in years. So I'm just going to have to put my rate down as R, and my time down as 6. Now, what can I do to simplify this right-hand side? Well, I can multiply, because of the associative property of multiplication. I can multiply 25,000 times 6. So I'm going to do that here. Over here, since I don't have a calculator, and I'm going to say 6 times 5 is 30, carrying my 3 times, that would be 12 plus 3 is 15, so it looks like this is going to be 3750 is equal to 150,000 times R. Now, what would you do if you wanted to solve for R? You want R to get isolated. You're going to have to divide by the coefficient of that variable term. Well, this coefficient is huge. It's 150,000. I'm going to have to divide both sides by 150,000. On the right-hand side, that would clear, and I would have just R. On the left, I'm going to have a decimal, which would be my rate. It's usually represented as a decimal. But for right now, since we are not into dividing decimals at the moment, we're just going to leave it like it is, not reduced, because I just wanted to make a point that interest formula would end up, you could solve for any one of the variables if you didn't know it. Now let's take a look at example 3. This one is volume. It is equal to length times width times height. And they want us to solve for W. In other words, the width is the one that they want to solve for. I'm going to put a square around it. How would I do that? Well, my formula, volume, is equal to length times width times height, and I want W to be the one that I solve for. So I'm going to basically divide by the coefficient. What's multiplied times W? Well, both of these are multiplied times W, so I'm going to divide by L times H. In other words, L times H over here, I'll divide both sides by that. Well, L over L cancels, and H over H, these turn into 1s. All I have left is W. What do I have over here on the left? I have volume divided by length times height. Sometimes it's even easier to do the math when we don't have the numbers. You don't have to worry about messing them up. All you have to do is the same operations with the letters. Example 4, this time we're solving for y. So we want to get y by itself. But what's bothering us is we have a negative x over there. So let's do the opposite. Let's add x to both sides. On the left, those x's turn into 0. So now I have y alone. What do I have on the right? Well, I have 7 plus x, or could say x plus 7. Since y is all by itself, I have solved for it. Y is equal to 7 plus x. For number 5, I want to solve for a. Well, this time I don't have anything multiplied times a, but I've got b and c added to it. So I'm going to subtract b, and I'm going to subtract c from both sides. I better do the same thing over here to the left, so I'll subtract b and subtract c. What happens here? Well, these turn into zeros. All that's left on the right is a, which is what I want. And over here on the left, I have p minus b minus c. Example 6 has a fraction. and it wants me to solve for k. Let me put a square around it so I know what I'm solving for. But in essence, I'm still going to clear the fraction by multiplying by the common denominator. The denominator of my fraction is 4. I only have one term over here on the right-hand side, 1/4 times f times k. There's only one term. Remember, terms are separated by addition and subtraction. So I'll multiply that times 4. And over here on the left, I multiply d times 4. Now, when I multiply d times 4, I get 4d. On the right, when I multiply 4 times 1/4 fk, the 4's will cancel or cross-reduce. I'll have 1 times f times k. Now, I've got to solve for k, so I'm going to divide by the coefficient of k. Well, that is f. When I do that, these f's will reduce. I'll have k, and it's equal to 4d divided by f.